Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here today. This is Nicole with Topaz, and I'm here with Mr. Greg Rostami. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, everybody.
He is here to present the benefits of masking, and he is our featured trade show rep. So if you've ever been to a photo show where we were there, you've probably seen him and seen his presentation. He's also one of the foremost experts on Topaz ReMask, and I'm really excited to see what he can show you today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Greg and let him just go ahead and get started with everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. That was a wonderful introduction. Hello, everybody. I can see there's a lot of people that are on. And the main purpose of this presentation today is to show you all the different ways that you can use Topaz ReMask. Basically, all the different applications of masking. So let me just get started with this first photo. The most obvious application of masking is obviously to drop out the background. So you can see that Topaz ReMask really excels in very quickly giving you these amazing results where every strand of hair and even the most subtle of details, for example, that you can see on the side of her arm, those little tiny pieces of hair that are sticking out, can all be very quickly captured using Topaz ReMask. So that's the most basic use, is just maybe dropping out the background. Now, as you start looking into how you can use this, here is a photo. I should actually say this is a work of art from our user in Canada, Sylvia DiGiorgio. And you can see that how Sylvia will mix using Topaz ReMask with some of our other applications. So in the original photograph, you probably notice how there is a background behind her. And Sylvia is using ReMask to drop out the background and replace it with something that seems a little bit more painterly. And now she's also using Topaz's Clean to be able to clean up the actual portrait itself and create this really beautiful painterly kind of effect. So from a photograph, by combining two Topaz technologies, both Topaz's ReMask to drop out the background, as well as Topaz Clean, we've created this beautiful painter effect. This is actually one of my files. If you know about who I am, I create iPhone apps, and so this is just an example of how I took a photograph of a hand and I combined it with a background of stormy clouds to create a graphic for the app that I sell on the App Store, which is a magic app, since I create magic apps. Once again, it's just an artistic use of using Topaz ReMask. Now, one of the most classic purposes of masking is sky replacement. So essentially on the left-hand side, you can see how we've got a boring sky, and we want to be able to put in some beautiful clouds in the background. And hence, by using Topaz ReMask, just by masking the bride and the railing here, you can easily drop in any kind of a sky that you like. Now, as we keep moving forward here, you're going to see the applications start becoming not only a little bit more advanced, but things that normally you wouldn't think about as far as masking. Now, here, once again, more of a typical use of masking, where her background on the left-hand side just doesn't make sense. There's just a wall back there, and so it would make more sense for her to be on the open road with sky that's in the background. So, again, that kind of a use. So now, this is a photograph from one of our favorite users, Bruce Lyceus. We see Bruce all the time at Anime Expo, and he is a really famous cosplay photographer. And cosplay stands for costume play, where these guys, dress up in these beautiful costumes from their famous anime shows. Now, this is a great shot, mainly because I love the pose, the angle. It's very comic book, exaggerated kind of a pose. The background is not so hot. So Bruce took one of his shots that is from the interior of a building in downtown Los Angeles, and he combined it together to create this final effect. Now you can see that Bruce is using, once again, all of the different Topaz technologies combined together. First, he is using Topaz Adjust in the background, so it's allowing him to take this photograph from the buildings and add a lot of texture to it. And you can see here the textures that are along the top of this, looks like a cooling unit there. And he is also using Topaz Adjust on the character itself. Now, the reason why I like this photograph is because it highlights how important it is to be able to match the foreground and the background together as far as the color theme is concerned. To be able to match the intensities of the shadows, so the darks match the darks, and at the brights, that are the highlights that are on his face and the highlights that are on his boots, are going to kind of match up with the kind of highlights that you might find in the background. And that's really the art of compositing, and Bruce has done a great job with this shot right here. Here's another example, once again, a shot from Bruce's collection. Really great shot, great pose. Once again, the background isn't so hot. And so Bruce took a photograph from a staircase from one of the buildings here in Los Angeles, and this is the combination. So again, by using Topaz ReMask and a great job of matching the foreground and background elements, you put them together. This is a shot from Layer Cake Elements. It's probably one of my favorites that I use in a demonstration, where we've got just a shot of the cowboy and the horse. And so now, by using one of the Layer Cake skies, which we will be talking about in an upcoming webinar, you can actually take your foreground elements that you mask using Topaz ReMask and convert them into silhouettes. Silhouettes are a wonderful artistic expression. It's a very simple and direct way of communicating an idea. And it's also very dramatic in that, you're really highlighting the intensity of the background in contrast to the foreground just being a silhouetted shape. In a moment, I'm actually going to show this to you. Let's jump into Photoshop here for a moment just to show you what that is made out of. So as you can see from over here, the original photograph started out as this photo right here. All right. Now, of course, here is our element there after it has been masked using Topaz ReMask. And if you zoom in, you'll be able to see that because of the strengths of ReMask, every little strand of hair for the horse has been perfectly captured. And if you look at the tail over here, again, you'll notice that too. Now, if you were to combine this just with the background, the way that it is right now, it works pretty well, but I wanted to make it a little bit more dramatic as far as the silhouette. And that's why you can see over here that by introducing basically a layer adjustment in Photoshop, what I have done is made it so that I'm colorizing that layer as well as I am darkening it. Let me actually put these here side by side so you can see that better. So essentially, this is what it looked like, without any of the darkening. And here is what it looks like now with the darkening applied. And if I zoom in, you'll probably notice that I did maintain just a little bit of color there. And I did that by choosing the colorize option over here in the adjustments layer. And as you can see, the lightness has been brought way, way down to create this wonderful silhouette effect. Now, the folks at Layer Cake have created a variety of different composites with this particular photograph. So here are just a few of them, just to show you how incredibly easily you can change the entire mood of a photograph. Like, if you look at this photo over here, it's so different in its mood than the photograph that I just showed you a second ago where it was a silhouette. And this is really where, when you start experimenting more and more with ReMask, you're going to realize how the background is going to so severely influence what your foreground subject looks like and just totally change the feeling. Like in this case, it looks like, you got the cloud, stormy skies in the background, which is very different. It's a more agitated, I would say a little more moody kind of a photograph than the one that we had before with a silhouette where it was a little more calm and a sunset kind of a feel. So as we continue with some of the other silhouette examples, here is a photograph of a dancer in front of just a white background, a typical studio shoot, and a background from the Macintosh. So if you got a Mac computer, this is one of the many backgrounds that you find for your wallpaper of the computer. And when you combine them together, it's not iPod, it's iTopaz. So here I'm just having a little fun with what normally is part of our pop culture with the whole iPod theme that used silhouettes as a way of highlighting their brand. Here's another shot that's from Anime Expo. And in this case, you're going to see how you're using Topaz ReMask as a way of dropping it not only out the background, but combining that with Topaz Simplify to create a work of art. Now, if you just simply drop out the background, what's nice is it will create this beautiful comic book effect, because the background is just white. The character has all the colors from the original photograph. And the way that I did that was I used Topaz Clean to clean up some of the textures that were in the photo. And I used Topaz Simplify here actually to create the lines. And by combining all of that together, you can create this really nice comic book drawn effect. And here are a few more examples of that. Once again, a photo from, I believe this one is Comic-Con actually. And you can see that these guys in their costumes actually have their badges hanging from their belts. So once again, here is an example where we're dropping out the background using Topaz Simplify, and pardon me, I should say Topaz ReMask, and I'm using Topaz Simplify to add in these dark lines around the edges that makes it look like somebody actually drew it. And also on the top of that, simplifying the shading as well. And that's one of the reasons why you see that there's this harsh cut of shading in contrast to what you get from the original, which is got all the smooth gradients that are there, and all those textures in the photograph have gone away because of using Topaz Simplify. Now, here's probably one of my most artistic examples of using Topaz ReMask. This was submitted by one of the other photographers that has used Topaz well. Now, first of all, we're using ReMask, but the background is really interesting. This is kind of like a stylized piece that by using Topaz Simplify, he has made it seem like the background is a painting. And this particular artist or photographer sent in several examples of that, and sometimes he's even using Topaz's Clean in the background to, again, create this very artistic depth of field kind of an effect. Here's another one right there. It's really beautiful. So the foreground element is maintaining the fidelity and the details of a real photograph where the background is very abstract. Once again, another use where you're not necessarily replacing the background. In this case, there is a monster growing out of the hair of the poor bride. And by using Topaz's ReMask, along with Topaz lens effects, you can actually put the background out of focus. Now, this is really great in creating these post-processed depth of field or bokeh effects. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let me actually jump into one of the examples that I have here for you, which is this one right here. All right. The photograph, all of the glasses are in focus. Now, by using Topaz ReMask, you can create what's called a depth map. So these depth maps, as you can see, it's kind of like a gradation where the black represents the things that are really, really close, and the white represents the things that are far away. And let me do that here for you right now just so you can see how that works. So let's jump back here into Photoshop for a moment. And here it is. Let me put that on the side here there. So there's two photographs that are actually here. I mean, the only reason why I have this other photograph is to show you what real depth of field looks like. And you can see the foreground glasses in focus while the background's out of focus. But we want to use Topaz's ReMask along with some lens effects to create a faux depth of field. So as I pull down to Topaz lens effects, as you know, with all of the Topaz products, you've got all these wonderful presets on the left-hand side where you can just simply click on, let's say, our Canon 50mm depth of field, and it produces exactly the kind of depth of field that you would get from that lens. Or you can even create your own lenses. So I created one that I call Real Depth of Field. And when you click on it, it's just going to do the entire image. But what we really want right now is a depth map. And you can either create these depth maps inside of Topaz Lens Effects, or you can load in a TIFF, which is exactly what I'm going to do right now, for what the depth of this image is, or the depth map of the image. And once again, you can see here that's exactly what the image is right there. Black is representing the things that are close to us, and the white, as it gradates from the black to the white, represents the things that are fading into the distance. And at this point, Lens Effects, gets the idea. Hence, it takes the photo where everything was in focus, and now it brings attention to the foreground glass, and it puts the background out of focus. The other thing that I love about Lens Effects is if you changed your mind, let's say I click Select Focal Plane, and I click on the glass in the background. Well, guess what's going to happen now? Now, the glass in the background is what's in focus, while the foreground is going out of focus. And you can do this anywhere you want. So if you click on the glass that's in the middle ground, obviously the middle ground is what's in focus, and the background and the foreground is going out of focus. So this is really, really, really powerful. So if you do spend a little bit of time creating these depth maps, you can really be well rewarded in the kind of effects that you can create in post. In fact, I got a couple of good examples of that to show you. Here's a photograph from the Staples Center right here in Los Angeles. Again, I took a photograph of my hand as well. In a moment, we're going to show you how my hand comes in. But by taking that photo and bringing it into lens effects, you can see that this time I used this depth map right here. All it is just a gradient that goes from the black that represents the things that are close all the way to the background. But by using Topaz's ReMask, I masked the big jumbotron that's hanging in the middle of the stadium. And that's why it creates that effect of there's depth of field there. Now also, please notice that that jumbotron is colored kind of like a medium gray. And that's because that, as far as how deep that is in the frame, it's not very, very close to the camera, which would be black. And it's not all the way in the distance, which would be white. It's somewhere in the middle ground. And that's why, as you create these depth maps using Topaz ReMask, just keep that in mind. And then here's the final composite where we have taken our blurry version of the shot and my hand in this pinching gesture, and we combined it together to create the final composite. One of our users got inspired, so he took this photograph over here, and then he stuck his hand in there too with a little use of Topaz lens effects for creating that faux miniature effect. So let me jump into a few more of the fun applications of Topaz ReMask. Finally, just simply using ReMask as a way of spot coloring your photos. So just by doing a quick outline around the flowers, you can make the rest of the image here in black and white. So that pretty much sums up all of the different ways that you can play with Topaz ReMask, along with some of the other tools that we have here for you in Topaz Labs to create a variety of different effects and help you get the artistic vision that you really want. So Nicole, I'm going to pass it back on to you.
All right, thanks, Greg. Yeah, those are some great examples that definitely show the benefits of masking. We do have many people asking about, in ReMask, the actual getting in and doing an example there. Would you mind going into the program?
Okay. Let's try an example right now, actually. Okay, let me take any one of the images that I use. In fact, let's take this image, this right here, okay, and show you how we can do some of the things that we just talked about right now. So let me just drag and drop that right into Photoshop. Okay, so I'll also get rid of the one I was doing before. There we go. Okay. So just as far as the way that I like to use ReMask, I'm going to change the workflow here just to be the default workflow of Photoshop. And I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer just so that we can come back to it a little later on. Under Filter, you're going to pull down the Topaz Labs, Topaz ReMask. And let's grab a nice thick brush and start doing the outline. So by default, this is what Topaz gives you. It gives you that blue brush. And when I first start out, I usually don't make the brush super thin. I try to make the brush kind of thick as I do this, just mainly because I'm going to let the computer try to do the best that it can in figuring out what the mask should look like, because in a moment we're going to go back in and refine the mask until we get it exactly the way that we want. Now you're also noticing over here that as I've made the brush rather thick, I'm going to take a really quick brush across each little strand of hair. So that's going to make sure that we cover all these little subtleties of the hair sticking out from the side of her face. Let's get all these little guys in there. And as we get to the areas that are not so detailed, you're always welcome to make the brush a little bit thinner, so it's going to not get so many of the details in there. Okay, let's go back down and finish up our quick outline. So once you've done the quick outline, now you can use your red bucket fill to red filled background. Now red is going to tell Topaz ReMask what you don't want. So we have now already created our tri-map. That tri-map stands for 3 colors. That's what the tri comes from. Red representing the things that you don't want in the background. Blue represents the things that Topaz ReMask needs to compute, or the difficult areas, all of the edges or the transparencies that we want the computer to figure out. And then finally green, and green represents the things that are solid on your mask. Once you've created the tri-map, you're going to click on the Compute Mask button. And when it's done doing the calculations, you get your first draft of a mask. Now that's actually pretty amazing considering how complex all the hair and everything else is that's on your image. But as we look at the actual keep channel, you can see that there are certain areas that need a little bit of work, and by default, Topaz now has turned on our magic brush. Magic brush basically means that now if I was to select, let's say, the red brush, I can just go in here and click some of the areas where I might not want some of those extra details. Like as I look over here in my mask, I can see that's a little extra over here, so I can just click on that. It's getting rid of it. Essentially, because I have selected the red brush, what's happening is red tells ReMask the things that you don't want. So just clicking on it with red, and it's simple as that, and that's what's getting rid of some of these extra things around the edges that are unnecessary. And that's really what I'm doing, just kind of going around the edges, finding the things that I know I don't want or need in my mask that's extra and getting rid of it. Sometimes I will work actually in the mask channel as I do that. So sometimes it will show it to me in a better way in contrast to looking at it under the keep channel. And I really urge users to do that, to switch back and forth between all these different channels, and it's going to really help them visualize their mask better to get a really nice, perfect mask. Now, after you're done, cleaning up your mask as best as you can, one of the problems that we're noticing right now is that how we have this extra colors that are from the original background, which is in this case green, that's bleeding around the edges of our character. Now the solution for that is make sure you are in the keep channel when you do this. Over here all the way at the bottom it says foreground color, and there's a slider called recovery. And when you crank this up, you can already see that some of it is already beginning to happen, but there is now in the latest version of Topaz ReMask a button that says high quality. Now what ReMask is doing is it's analyzing all these semi-transparent areas and it's trying to figure out what the real color of the foreground is without the background color contaminating it. Now it's going to take a little bit of calculation. That's why it actually says that that's a little slow. But after it's done, ta-da, you get these amazing results. Now, if there's any little part of this where it didn't get perfectly right, then you can just kind of either brush it over again with the blue brush, or you can even grab the red brush that we had before and go around those edges as well. In fact, I'm right now just doing it with the blue brush, but it looks actually pretty good. Oh, see a little bit of a green over here, so I can just kind of brush over that with the blue brush. I got rid of that as well. And here, where we see some of that ghosting from the mask, I can grab my red brush and do that outline. So let's click OK. So we just made a mask. There it is right there. So to highlight one of the effects that we were talking about before, let's say we want to change the background so it's going to look a little more artistic than what we had before. So you can see that the background right now is exactly the same as the foreground, and that's why not much is changing between the two of them. But let me turn off that foreground. And for the background, we're going to use Topaz Clean to try to make the background leaves look like a work of art. So I'm going to predominantly concentrate on the leaves here in the background, crank up my Topaz Clean just a bit. Oh, I can see what's already happening. You can see how it kind of looks like the background is like a painting right now. Let's accent the edges just a bit. There we go. It's getting better and better. Let me bring that up just a little bit more. So it's going to make it more of an artistic kind of an effect. And when we're happy with it, let's click on the OK button. All right. So now you can see that the whole image has been modified so it looks like it's clean. But unfortunately, we have lost all of the details that were here for our character. Well, that's the reason why we had done that mask. And there you go. Here's the final effect. Where you're noticing where, because we have masked her out, all of her details, her hair, the details of her face are being perfectly maintained, while the background now looks like a work of art.
Thank you so much. That really helps.
I'll pass that back on to you, Nicole.
Great. I just want to tell everybody, if you have any questions that you'd like Greg to answer, we still have about 30 minutes left of the webinar, so go ahead and send them on in. I definitely have a few for you already, Greg.
Sure.
So let's see here. Richard asks, when replacing a background, does the new background and the old foreground need to have the same resolution and or size to make the new photo look correct? Is that necessary?
No, no. As far as the photo looking correct, that is purely artistic. One of the ways of answering that is, there's a photograph that I use in my demonstration all the time where there is a photograph of a dog and there's some flowers in the background that are out of focus. The photograph of the flowers was actually really, really low res when I brought the dog in the first place, or I should say, when I brought the flowers in the first place. And just by me making that a little blurry, it made that all work. But I'll do the comp here for you just so you can see what it looks like. We jump into Topaz ReMask, and this is something that I do in a demonstration all the time, where you spend about 4 or 5 seconds doing a quick outline around the perimeter of the dog. You make the background red. Now, by the way, the reason why I can go so fast in viewing these outlines of the backgrounds is because I'm using the keyboard shortcuts to do all of this. And I really urge all of the users of Topaz to learn the keyboard shortcuts, especially when it comes to masking. For example, if you put your mouse here on the bucket field for red, you notice that it says that T is the keyboard shortcut for that bucket fill. And that's how I can quickly just hit T on the keyboard with my left hand and do that bucket fill. And hitting the Enter key is equal to hitting the Compute Mask button. So you got the mask, and you click OK, and there you go. You got the dog against a flowery background. That flowery background was a completely different resolution. It's kind of blurry right now, but it still works. So by using your transformation tools in Photoshop, in fact, you can see me using the transformation tool right now. The resolution of that photograph, by the way, used to be, let me actually escape out of that for a moment. The resolution of that photograph originally was actually pretty low. It used to be a size that was, I want to say, maybe about that big right there. You can see that's approximately the size that it had. And so all I did in Photoshop was I just grabbed it, and using the transformation tool, I made it much, much bigger. So now I hit the Enter key, and you can see that the mask is still going to work out okay. The only problem that I have with this shot is that the perspective seems a little off. It almost seems like the dog is like maybe sitting on a stool or something, you know. But other than that, it's actually a pretty nice mask.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, this is probably the most popular question we've had so far today. You showed lens effects and
Yes.
depth maps. If you could go
Yes.
over how to create the depth map one more time, because we have a lot of people asking where you're getting the depth maps, how they're being created, and I want to make sure to address all those questions coming through.
Okay, let's do one here right now.
Okay, great.
The example that I showed in the demonstration is this example right here, that we had with the stadium, right? One of the things that's important is I usually start out with looking at the image as a gradient of what would be close to me and what's far away from me. And the way I do that is I create a new layer here in Photoshop, and then I grab my gradient tool, and I just make sure that my gradient is going to go from white to black. And by default, it actually usually defaults to white to black, So at this point, what I'll do is, let's say I'm assuming that this area here in the background, where it's all the way far away at the stadium, is the furthest point that we have in our photograph. So let's say I believe that that's actually where the horizon ends, the furthest depth. So I'm going to now create, or draw, I should say, a gradient for you. And basically all I do here is just draw a line. Okay? And right now I'm using the linear gradient tool. And as I do this, you'll see that, okay, now that's not what I wanted because white's going to be in the foreground. So let me undo that here for you. And I'll reverse the gradient and do that just one more time. So as I draw that line, okay, you'll see that it immediately creates this gradient. So white represents the things that are the furthest away, and obviously now black represents the things that are very close. So the next thing that I do is I want to now create a mask that's going to be for the big jumbotron that's here in the middle. And the way that I do that is I'll just take my original image, I'll go ahead and duplicate it, and under Filter, I'm going to pull down the Topaz ReMask, and I'll do a quick little outline. So let's zoom in, and so I get the jumbotron smack down in the middle there, and do a quick little outline here. Now, when it comes to creating these depth maps, what's really important is for you to create that nice outline. You know, the accuracy of it is really not that important. What's more important is keep in mind that the actual mask, this shape, is actually more important than anything else. So now you're noticing me just using ReMask to clean up that mask a bit. As I go around the edges over here, I can use the red brush to drop some of that out. Let's drop some of these out around the edges here as well. And when I'm happy with it, it looks actually pretty good. Let's click on the OK button. Let me get a little bit of that green in there too. Okay, so let's click on the OK button. Okay, so now you can see that we did just create a mask, which is just for that big jumbotron. Now, at this point, I want to add this particular shape, which is what you're seeing right here. So let me click on that using my Option click key, just so you can see what that mask looks like. I want to introduce that shape into my map here, my depth map. Here's the way that I do it. Usually, I'll just take the layer mask that I created, and I will say apply it as a layer mask, which means it's going to now be incorporated into that layer. And then I will command click on it, which means that now it shows me this as a cutout. Now at this point, I'll change my focus in Photoshop, so I'm now actually painting on this gradient. Now what I want to fill in this with, I don't want to fill it in with a white, because I know that it's not representing the background. And I don't want to fill it in with black either, because I know it's not representing the foreground. I want to fill it in with a color that's somewhere here around the middle of that gradient, which is equivalent to what that would be if you are immediately above that little Clippers logo that's right there. So as I look at my depth map, I can see that, yeah, right around here is the color that I want. So in Photoshop, you're going to go Edit, Fill, okay? Now you see over here how I can choose a particular color that I want. So let's choose color. And just go ahead and click exactly on the color that you want, which is right around where that Clippers sign would be, which is right about here. Okay, let's go ahead and click OK. And I click OK. And now you can see that that's exactly what it just did. It created that little grayscaled kind of a jumbotron floating thing in the middle. So now at this point, it's just a matter of saving this out. But make sure you save it out with a .tiff extension. It's going to be a TIFF file. So here I'm going to go save, or I should say save as. All right, let's make sure that we select TIFF for this, which is right there. And I'm going to make sure that I call it TIFF. I'll put it on the desktop so I can get to it really quickly. I'll just call it depth. Okay, hit save. And we don't really care about the compression stuff. We'll just go ahead and click OK. Right, include layers. Including layers will increase file size. Okay. Let's say I don't include the layers. Let me just flatten that out here for you. Last time I did it, I don't remember if I included the layers or not, but let's not include the layers. So File, Save As, again, let's put it right here on the desktop and make it a TIFF. Make sure you make the extension TIFF. I think that it accepts both of them in Topaz, but I'm just making sure it's going to work right now. Depth, let's call it TIFF. Let's hit save, and that's okay. All right, so now we're done. So at this point, let's bring back that photograph that we had into Photoshop. And again, we're going to go into Topaz Lens Effects. Okay. And here, immediately, we're going to use Load, which is right here where it says Load Mask. And on our desktop, we're going to find our depth.tiff. So when I click on that, if you click on the Edit Depth Map, you can see that what we just created has been loaded in. Now, at this point, you'll see that Topaz will actually start working on it, and immediately it gives you an effect. It actually looks like it's, trying to create this depth of field effect. So at this point, you want to scroll down on the right side and click on that focal plane and select focal plane, and just click right there in the middle of the Jumbotron. So now you're going to notice that the things that are in that middle ground are in focus. Let me zoom in on it so you can see that really well. Okay, you see that the things that are in that middle ground are in focus, while the things that are in the foreground have now gone out of focus. And obviously, if I zoom out, you'll also be able to see that things that are in the background have gone out of focus as well. And that's a quick review of how I make depth maps.
Okay, great. Let's see here. I have lots of other questions coming through, so let's see.
That's all right.
I have to say, after many hours of working with ReMask and considering comments from fellow photographers with whom I associate, he finds it difficult to achieve the results that you're getting with the hair and the small details. He says, I realize that choosing the right background, RE color and texture makes a big difference, but there still seems to be a gap between what he's able to achieve and what you're able to achieve. He says, what am I missing? And honestly, I just want to say, first off, obviously it takes a lot of practice and working with it to get really, when you're working with complex masks, but do you have any tips to kind of work with more of those smaller details like hair on backgrounds that might not be so contrasty as the one that we just did?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing to keep in mind is, first of all, if you watch any of the tutorial videos that we've recorded in the past, we really go through all of the features that are in Topaz ReMask that are designed to address just about every problem that can ever come up. There isn't one general tip that I can give you. I mean, if there was one strong tip that I can give more than anything else is a few people know about foreground color recovery, and that seems to be kind of like a magic tool that really makes Topaz work very, very well. In fact, to highlight that, again, one of the photographs that I use in the demonstration all the time is the photograph right here. So when I did this photograph over here, you can see how if I was to try to mask this out, I already know that I'm going to get some of that color from the background is going to bleed in, but you'll see how immediately, just by using our foreground color recovery, it's going to get rid of all that. And again, you're noticing how as I go around some of the areas that have the really frizzy hair, I'm making the brush considerably thicker just to make sure I cover all those details. And then where it's not so frizzy, I'm making the brush thinner, make the background red, and let the computer do the calculations. So we come up with a mask, which looks pretty good. But then when you zoom in, a lot of people are immediately seeing this, and that kind of scares them because what you're really looking at is the colors that are from the background that are out now bleeding around the edges of the hair. The solution for that is when you go all the way down, it says foreground color recovery, you're going to crank that all the way up, and then just turn on the new high quality mode. And as we said before, the computer analyzes all of the semi-transparent areas. And it's trying to take what it believes are the foreground colors, which is in this case the hair, and the background colors, which in this case is different from every different part of the image, and trying to recover. And there it is. It's done right there, and it looks actually amazing. So at this point, you hit OK. So that's probably the biggest tip that I could give you. Another tip about masking is that some people try to mask against a perfect white background or a black background. Now, if your intention is to have your subject in front of a white background or a black background, then yes, definitely make sure that it works perfectly in that. But in cases like this, where you can see right now the background is once again those flowers that we were using before, everything works perfect. I mean, in fact, the image, you'd say, well, yeah, she was photographed in front of that background, when you and I know that's not the case. That's the real background that she was photographed in front of. Now, so always consider actually what your background image is as far as how much work and effort you're going to put into it to create a convincing mask or convincing composite.
Awesome. Thank you for showing that. I love that foreground recovery tool. It's my favorite thing, too. It's
Yeah.
awesome. All right. I have a lot of questions here really quick about Topaz Clean and kind of the background work that you did with that one image that you just went through, as well as a lot of questions about some of the examples that you showed with Topaz Clean. Would you mind going through real quick and just explaining maybe like quick little summation of what it does and how it works?
Sure, sure. Let me.
Because I have a lot of people asking about it.
A lot of people asking about Topaz Clean. Okay. Clean is one of the unsung heroes at Topaz Labs. It's a very, very powerful technology. And I use it a lot for different kinds of artistic effects. I'm going to try to see if I can find a really good one over here to highlight for you. Let's try this one right here. Okay. Drag and drop that in there. Okay. So we want to be able to make this a little bit more artistic. So under Filter, you're going to pull down to Topaz Clean. Okay. And you can see, first of all, if I zoom into this, let me reset it actually, so we go all the way back to the way it was before. That obviously it just looks like a photograph, you know. So here are a couple things that we're going to do. If you start out with a preset, that's probably one of the easiest ways of using Topaz Clean. Just click on Cartooned, and you're going to get an effect right away. So the purpose of Clean is to be able to clean up areas that would have textures while it tries to maintain the details that are there in your photograph. So first, just starting from the top where it says Strength, bring up that strength. Now, in this case, I'm going to create somewhat of an artistic kind of an effect. So I'm going to bring that up to about a level of 3. Usually, I drop my radius all the way down to the minimum because it maintains more of my colors. But then, when it comes to edges, I want to accent the edges. Now, as I do this, take a look at what happens. Let me zoom in just a little bit further here with the eyes. If you look at what happens when the edges are at 0, you can see how the edges, especially for her eyelashes, seem like they're kind of broken up. You know, they don't look like they're being accented or smoothed out. Whereas when you start, cranking up that accent edges, it's really going to beautifully smooth out the edges. Usually at this point, I also like to kind of sharpen those as well. It's going to give me this very artistic kind of an effect. Let me bring my threshold up. What threshold is doing is that it's forcing Topaz ReMask to drop out more and more and more details. For example, if you take threshold and you bring it all the way down, look what's going to happen. You're going to notice how a lot of the details from the original photograph are being considered as it's trying to smooth it out. But as you keep moving that threshold higher and higher, it starts dropping out the details. For example, over here, I can still see some of the wrinkles that were right underneath her eyes. I can also see even that little vein there that she had in her eye. But so as we move that threshold higher and higher, you'll see that those details just start to disappear. They start actually melting away. At the same time, though, it is maintaining these very structured lines. So if I was to zoom back out just a little bit, you'll see that for every area of the image, it's doing a beautiful job. In the original photograph, this is what her nose looks like. Here's what it looks like now. You're getting this beautiful airbrushed kind of a smooth feel to it. Again, for the lips, this is what the lips used to look like, and that's what the lips look like now. And so Clean is pretty amazing in creating these really stylized, very smooth kind of effects. And obviously, you can use Clean to just clean up your portraits as well, and we have presets that can accommodate that. There's a preset that's called Skin Even, where you're noticing that it is cleaning that up. So that's what the image used to look like. That's what the image looks like now. As you zoom in, again, you'll notice that some of the bumps that are on her skin and some of the bumps that are on her forehead, those are being really all smoothed out. So you can either use it in an exaggerated way or you can use it in a more subtle way, which is what you're seeing here right there.
Thank you so much, Greg. Appreciate that. All right, a couple other questions about masking. Lynn asks, when shooting in the studio, is there a best color for a background to make Topaz ReMask work best?
That's a great question. Now, because of the visual effects industry, people are really turned on to using green screens or blue screens. Even though green screens and blue screens are great if you've got chroma keying software, the problems with using green screens and blue screens is a problem called, it's like a color cast, or they call it spill, actually. It's a color spill, because when your background is big green or big blue, there's that humongous kind of like a green light behind you that's shining on it. Now, in contrast, when you're using things like Topaz ReMask, what's happening is that the background is just nature, you know. When it comes to a studio, here's what I highly recommend. Don't shoot against a white background, mainly because oftentimes you're using not fill lights and also other lights that are going to be, let's say, around the hair, which is, here's an analogous example we just used before, where there's going to be a lot of white that will be around the edges of your character. And it's really beautiful in the studio when you use these kinds of lights to highlight any kind of rim lighting that you're doing. But unfortunately, if your background is white, what's going to happen is it's going to be just white against white. Now, if the background is black, that is actually its own problem, because to create a dramatic photograph, sometimes there's going to be shadows that will be in your shot, and those shadows are going to blend in with the black as well. So believe it or not, gray is actually a pretty good color in the studio, because there aren't too many things that are a part of your rim lighting that are going to be gray. And there's not too many things that are a part of your shadows that are going to be gray. And so in general, gray is a nice neutral color that isn't going to give your character any kind of a green cast or a blue cast. So the answer to that question is gray.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Linda and Mark would like to know if what you're doing here today you could actually do through Photo Effects Lab too, the new program.
Yes, yeah. In fact, that's one of the coolest things about Photo Effects Lab is all of these things are extremely easy in Photo Effects Lab. You know, so if you want to see that happen, here's Photo Effects Lab, right there. You know. And if you wanted to bring in images and composite them together, let's try one.
All right.
Yeah. Should I go through that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. So here is the photo that we were using before. Let's just drag and drop that in here. You know, and let's even drag and drop some other image in there too. In fact, the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to say add it from a file, and let's choose some crazy image for our background. Try to find something that would seem like it's going to work here, something that's analogous to a background. It might be like an interesting background right here. It can be any image, obviously, so it doesn't really matter which one you use. Let's try that one right there. Okay, so now you can see that we got two different images there, one for a foreground, one for a background. So let's take this image, and on the left-hand side where it says plugins, you're going to choose Topaz ReMask. So we'll start the plugin. Now I'm not going to spend the same amount of time as I did the last time as far as making an absolutely perfect mask. We're just really quickly going through the fact that this is going to work. Just the same work that we did before as far as doing that quick outline here with our character. Make sure you get those little frizzies of hair in there, and we'll finish it up here by doing...
As you're doing that line, are you using a tablet or just your mouse?
It's just my mouse.
Okay, great. Thanks.
It's just my mouse, yeah. I don't have a tablet, no. So here goes, you know, Topaz trying to figure out the mask, and you'll see the mask right there. And again, I'm not going to make it absolutely perfect. I might just drop out maybe some of the things that are over here, but let's say we're going to stop right there, right? And we click OK. And so now you'll notice that there's the mask, there's the background image, and I select the background image, and under Tools, let's choose Scale, and let's scale up that background, so it's going to match it up. And ta-da, we're done. So even though we were right inside of our new Photo Effects Lab, you just created a composite. And what's really great about this is that if we have users that like to use, let's see, products like Lightroom or Aperture or even iPhoto, this is an incredible way of creating composites right inside of those programs, even though those programs don't support layers.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have quite a few people asking about a tip if you have similar color hair, like blonde on a white background or anything like that. Is there a way to deal with that?
Yes, there is. Actually, Topaz really excels in this kind of stuff. I'm going to show that to you with actually the example that I have with the dog. The best thing that I can say about that is that even if there is only one bit worth of difference between the foreground and the background, ReMask will find it. Now, in contrast, if it's basically, let's say, a digital black against a digital black, it's 0 against 0, then it has no idea where that edge is, you know? Mm-hmm. So those are called implied edges, by the way, in the compositing world. But let me do one here for you just so you can see, you know, what kind of a job it does. The example that I use with the dog all the time actually has an area in it where it does show this problem. It's right here, where it's orange against orange. It doesn't really seem like there's any difference between the orange that's here on the ground versus the orange that's here on the side of the dog. But when you go into Topaz ReMask, you'll see that in the beginning, when you start doing the outline, it's not going to give you that edge exactly correctly, but by using just a magic brush, how immediately you'll be able to find that edge. So let's go ahead and do the mask, and let's focus as we zoom in to that lower right-hand corner right there. Once again, keep in mind that in the original photograph, it's basically an orange against orange. I'm sorry if it's all the way down at the bottom of the screen there, but that's actually where the problem is. And here, you can see how we have that problem, where we've got the problem where it's kind of like doesn't know really where that edge is. So now, since Magic Brush automatically turns on, you just click on your background brush and click on there, and boom, you just figured it all out. So even though that was very similar to each other, that just took care of that. There's going to be certain areas that those differences aren't going to be as much, that you might have to do a little more work to get that in there, and other areas which are going to be just as easy as what I showed you with the dog. Now, while I am in here, let me just show you that in the original photograph, you can see how we've got that black line that's touching the side of the dog, and why in a composite, you can see that little bit of a darkness right there. And I just took that foreground color recovery and I cranked it all the way up. And just by now clicking on the side of that, hey, there it goes, that disappears too. You know, so I hope that answers that question about things that could be similar.
Yes, definitely. All right, and last question here for you. I've had several people ask about that selective color that you showed with the bride and the flowers. Can you show how you used ReMask or masking to accomplish that?
Sure. Let's take the bride here. Okay. So again, I'm going to make another layer here for it. Just we have 2 layers that we can work with. Under Filter, we're going to pull down to Topaz ReMask. We'll zoom in pretty close, grab a pretty thick brush, and as always, do just a really, really quick outline. Now, by the way, within our Topaz black and white effects, we already have an incredible way of doing this using our edge-aware technology, which works out really, really, really well. But in this case, since we're talking about Topaz ReMask, we're going to get a much more accurate version of the flowers. So once you do the outline for the flowers, you're going to make sure the background is red, and you do ask ReMask to do its magic. And so there's the mask for the flowers. Usually at this point, I will look at it actually in the keep channel, and I start like just eating away at some of the edges that are over here on the mask. So I'll do this, this, and I know that that's a part of our bride back there, so I'll just kind of click on that. It's going to clean that up there. And as I go around the edges, that should be cleaned up too. And it's looking pretty good. So if I'm happy with it, and I'm actually very happy with it, I click OK. Right? So now you're going to notice that you've just created a layer which is only for the flowers. So for the background, you are welcome to use our famous Topaz black and white effects to create any kind of a black and white effect you like. In fact, just the default one I like a lot. So let's click OK on that. And ta-da! We're done.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, Greg. Well, I want to say thank you. I know everybody really appreciated some of the tips here, and definitely a lot of those composites, because you really inspired people in, you know, what you can do with it and what kind of composite imagery you can come up with. I had a lot of people talking about that, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was my main intention, is just to really inspire all of our users and just all the things you can do with ReMask, you know?
Yes, definitely. All right, everybody. I will go ahead and say goodbye, and we will be talking to you soon. Have a good day.